I'm Jamie Beck, and I'm a photographer.
Hello, I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Art, the podcast where we get up close and personal with women from around the world of visual arts. This is Season 2, Episode 33. My guest this week is the American photographer Jamie Beck, who focuses on portraying life and her natural surroundings in the Provence. Jamie is the author of 2 books, An American in Provence, Art, Life and Photography, published in 2022, which became a New York Times bestseller, and The Flowers of Provence, published in 2023. In the last few years, Jamie has created an online marketplace for her custom designs, and she's also founded the Starling Club, an online social club for creative women. Jamie was born in Arlington, Texas, one of 2 children to James Beck, a law enforcement officer, and Gina Piner, an accountant. She has an older brother and a stepfather. Her early interest in photography began as a child, wanting to memorialize images, which led to taking photos once her mother gave her her first camera. Jamie's love of fashion led her to starting her career in fashion photography once she had graduated from the New York Fashion Institute of Technology with a degree in fashion photography. We get to talk about all my
favorite things, I have a feeling.
She then worked in New York as a fashion and commercial photographer.
I know that you're on vacation, family time right now, so you're not in the Provence where I know you love it over there. You'll be going back shortly, but this is the beauty of your summer vacation,
most notably through her love of flowers and the lifestyles
my
of the
5-year-old daughter is on her school
Jamie
break,
lives in Apt
we come back to
with
the
her
United
husband
States
Kevin
to visit
and daughter
family
Eloise
in Texas, Kansas, and North Carolina, and get a lot of FaceTime since we live across the ocean most of the year.
And now you've been there for, 8 years now in the Provence, so you must absolutely love it.
Yes, I absolutely love it. And I was not supposed to be there for 8 years. This whole thing was a big accident. It was just a 1-year sabbatical that has never ended.
How did that come about then?
Well, I was on an airplane coming back to New York City where I lived and worked as a photographer. And the airplane had a lot of turbulence, and I was very dramatic, and I'm like, oh, I thought we were going to die. And the thought that popped into my head, it was not, I'll never see my family again. I'll never have children. It was, oh, great. Now I'll never know what it's like to live in France. And I heard myself say this, and I thought, oh my God, if that's my dying thought, that's probably something I should go and do. So I made myself a promise. If the plane landed, I would move to France for a year so I could experience whatever this was that made that thought pop into my head. And so the plane landed, and I applied for a visa, which is no easy feat. And I said, okay, well, if I get the visa, I'll actually do this. And I got the visa miraculously through many tears. And I set off to live for 1 year in the south of France in Provence. And it was a region that, as a photographer, I worked for many different brands, and I had been to Provence twice for different client shoots, and it haunted me, the beauty of it and the history of it, and I couldn't shake it. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to live in France, I don't want to live in Paris because I go to Paris for work all the time, and it's just another big city, ultimately, like New York, and I wanted something that was totally different. And I always kept thinking about Provence, and I read A Year in Provence, and I thought, that's where I'll go. I'll go there. And I went there for my year sabbatical, unplanned, in the middle of my career, which was very successful and fast moving in New York. And I shocked everybody by doing this. And I thought, I can always go back and it'll be a good rest and restart. And in fact, moving to Provence completely changed my life, and it changed my work and how I work and how I want to spend my time in this life. So here I still am on that journey 8 years later.
Now, looking at your website and your work, Jamie, would it be fair to say that you've styled yourself professionally in the Provence and the nature of the Provence?
Sort of. When you live in France, especially France, you you have to be folded into their way of life. And their way of life is very much tied to the seasons and the rhythm of that. So you can't eat whenever you want. You have to eat at lunchtime and at dinner time, and nothing's open in between. And you can't have a strawberry in November because it's not strawberry season. And so France just has this way of forcing you into the rhythm of nature. And then once you do that and you become, because, an American, and especially as a New Yorker, you're just so used to having anything you want, whenever you want, as easy and quickly as you want. And it's just not the actual real way of nature and of life. And it's not available like that in France. And so it's incredibly frustrating in the beginning when you move to a country like France. And then you have to fold into that rhythm and you realize how humane it is to live that way and how wonderful, and to miss certain fruits and vegetables of the year and look forward to their return. And so part of that rhythm, and you become it, and then you become to look like it, and you become to act like it. And so, like in the winter, I produce less photographs, I slow down. My energy and my days are about rest. And in the spring and summer, it's like I'm an abundance of photographs and of energy. And so is the nature outside. And so how I dress and everything like that reflects being in this environment.
But often Americans, I would say, and this is generally speaking, Jamie, they become the term American in Paris is, has a history to it. There's a background to that.
Right. And a romanticism too.
And when you live as an American in France, you are an American in France. But it sounds as if you're an American who's immersed themselves, as you say, into the rhythm of life over there. It's such an extent that you've become quasi-European in a way. But it has, to my point earlier, that this is your style now. It's stylized you. And it's informed your photography and how you perceive the nature of that environment as well. So
completely.
I'm wondering how this extends when you come back to the US. Does everyone notice it with you and your work?
Well, so here's the thing about that thought that popped into my head about France and the way I possibly seem more European now is that I feel as if my soul has always been from France. I just feel like I'm going home. And when I come back to the United States, I have more culture shock coming into America than I do in France. In France, I get it, and it just fits along with what my personal ideals are and what I enjoy in and about life. It's just my nature. And so I'm very comfortable there, and everything makes sense to me there. And it's very difficult for me when I'm in the States because I don't understand a lot about it, and I kind of have to force myself through it, which is totally bizarre because it's technically my homeland. So I just feel like there's a part of my soul that is home when I'm in France, and that's just why everything goes so smoothly about it. And to speak for a second about the American in Paris, romanticism, because there's a lot of dreamers who dream about living in France. And for that first year, it is that blissful dreaminess. And, you still have your baggage of your home culture is still imprinted on you before you kind of fold into the French way of life. But then once you start to stay and start really deciding to have a life in a foreign country and in France, you then have to really fight to be there. It is a struggle, and the romanticism disappears, and the reality of the madness of the French bureaucracy sets in. And so to get a testament to how much I love being in Provence is that I haven't given up that fight yet, which takes a lot of courage and willpower and determination to survive being there.
It reminds me of that book by Bill Bryson, I'm a Stranger Here Myself, which as an expat I feel too. If I go back to Europe, to England particularly, I'm a stranger here myself. I feel more at home in the mainland Europe. And it's interesting that adjustment. You have to immerse yourself to such an extent, and also to grasp the language so that you're not considered an outsider and a foreigner? And it seems that you've transitioned through that.
Well, I am fluent in the language through the visual language, through the photography. And that's how I communicate with French people and the French culture, and how I've been accepted into their culture is through the visual language of my work. The actual speaking language of French is sort of a joke with all of my French friends about how terrible my French is. And so I say about my 5-year-old daughter, Eloise, who was born in France, that, well, I birthed my translator because she goes to French school and she has the perfect French accent. So, and she gives me a hard time about my accent. So she helps me out a lot. And as she gets older, I'm going to really rely on her to help me become more fluent and confident and things like that. But it's not easy. I had no French lessons before I ever moved to France. And I actually wanted to learn French in high school, but because I grew up in Texas, my parents said, no, you need to learn Spanish. And I had no choice in that matter. And so when I lived in France, I told my parents, like, that French would have been really useful now, because I was starting from absolutely nothing and building my way up. But they have some wonderful programs in France in all of the villages. I live in AART, which is in the center of the park, national park in France. And it's a bigger town, but I wouldn't call it a city. And all the towns have these community centers, and they offer language programs. And so I'm in one of those classes. And it's quite interesting because we have people from all over the world living in Provence, from Brazil to Mexico, Thailand, India. So it's really interesting culturally to listen to other people speak French with, an Indian accent or a Spanish accent. And so it helps you feel less bad about how terrible the French pronunciation is, and the struggle we all go through to try to learn and to try to blend in more into the culture, which I love the French language. I think it's the most beautiful. Like, I just love listening to people talk in French, and I love watching movies and songs in French and things like that. So my goal is in 10 years to be fluent, hopefully.
Well, that's a great goal to have. Now, as you know, you were introduced to me by one of our previous guests here on the show, Paulette Pearson, who discovered you tucked away there in the Provence and was so taken by your work and recommended that I reach out to you and take a look at your work. She was very taken by it.
Well, let me just say something about Paulette really quickly. I ran into her in the village of Ile-sur-la-Sorgue, which is, they call it the Venice of Provence. And there was a little maison moga, a little épicerie that you can also have a breakfast type meal. And they sell fine wines from the south of France and Italy and cheeses. And it's this wonderful little shop. And she recognized me and we said hello. And she is a wonderful illustrator. And coincidentally, I just met her for the second time in Texas. So our little worlds keep overlapping with each other. But she's lovely and her work is lovely. She's about to do a artistic retreat herself in the south of France this fall. So I'm hoping she comes up with some more beautiful Provençal inspired works.
Yes, it is beautiful work too. Well, I'm so glad you guys have connected yet again. It was meant to be.
It's meant to be. The friendship is meant to be. She's part, we'll hopefully speak later about this, but she's part of my creative community club online.
Yes, which we do want to hear about later, but I'm going to rewind the clock now a little bit, Jamie, because this is what we do here on the show. I'm going to take you back. As you mentioned, you are from Texas. You were born in Texas in 1983. Now, one of two children, and your parents, James and Gina, for your father was in law enforcement and your mother an accountant. So take us back to childhood and what the little Jamie was like growing up. What was she interested in?
I was not like a normal child. I grew up with my grandmother in Texas because my parents were working. And so I was dropped off at her house every day. And my grandparents, whom I adored, and she was a very crafty person. She had a sewing machine in her dining room. We were always making my dresses and going to the fabric stores, and we'd go thrift store shopping and buy crazy gowns to play dress up in. And she had this wonderful vegetable garden. So we were always outside doing projects and growing things and eating things and making things. And she was just this wonderful way of an introduction into life. And I laugh a lot because when I'm in my studio in Provence, I'm there growing flowers and playing with bugs and painting things and making things. And I think, well, I'm just reliving my childhood every day. And I had this really magical, wonderful experience with her in her garden in Texas. And it's sort of a abundance of creativity and projects. And here I am now midway through life. And that's kind of what I do for a living. So that was my childhood, was this in this little bubble with my grandmother, who was so extraordinary and taught me so much.
And was the grandfather present?
Oh, yes. And he was wonderful. He was a carpenter. So he was always working on projects, and he would bring me along sometimes. He had a big old blue Ford pickup truck and wore cowboy hats and overalls and cowboy boots, even when he was roofing, like putting tiles on roofs and putting, nailing boards and stuff like that. And so he taught me a lot of things as far as carpentry, and we would build stuff together. And I loved him so much that one of my first memories is watching him work on a house, and he had sent me back to his truck to get something for him. And I thought, I loved him so much. I never wanted to forget him. So I said, I'm going to stare at him for as long as possible without blinking. So I'll never forget this moment and like seeing him. And I think if you want to rewind back to why I'm a photographer, I think that the reason I take photographs is because I'm trying to preserve the things I love. So what I was doing in that moment was taking a mental photograph. I just didn't know about cameras. I didn't know I could save things that way. So I was just staring at him with my eyes to make a photograph. And I can still remember, like, I still see that image in my head. And then when my mom gave me her camera when I was 13, it was like that instinct that I had a place to put it. And the world and the imagination that I lived in, I had a place to create it through that box. That box was everything to me, and it still is.
Would you say you have a photographic memory then, trained?
Not after I got the camera, because then I had something to do it for me. I'm like, I love that. I need to keep it. I take a picture of it. I love that. I need to, but before I learned about that, I would just take mental pictures like that. You have to really concentrate, and then it burns it in there like a photograph.
What was the first camera?
It was my mom's Pentax Spotmatic. It was a camera that was really popular in the 1970s. It's 35 millimeter all manual film camera. And so when I learned photography, it was strictly a shutter speed, an ISO, and an aperture. And that's it. There was no other bells and whistles and filters and all these things. That was it. And so I learned about overexposing is prettier beauty. Like, I would take my friends and I would put them in ball gowns and give them makeovers, and we do photo shoots because I love fashion and make believe. And so I learned by doing about, they look better if the exposure is like this, and it's about blurring and shutter speeds and the depth of field and things like that. And so it was all those three mechanisms for like the first 10 years of my life. And so I would never shoot a camera on auto anymore, because I have always just done it myself completely. So that's my introduction to photography.
So was that your introduction also to the darkroom then, and back then?
Yes. So in high school, we had a darkroom, which sadly, I don't think those exist in public high schools anymore. I went to a public school, and I just absolutely loved it. I mean, I was president of the photography club. I was the photo editor of the newspaper and the yearbook. I was 100%, my life was photography. I think my senior yearbook, like 98% of the photographs of the football events and the volleyball event, everything that was in there, I shot it. Like, that's just what I did it. Like, it was a full-time job every single day, because I loved it so much. And even though I never wanted to be a journalist, it didn't matter to me. I just wanted to be taking pictures and getting better all the time. And so I spent a lot of time in the darkroom. I was there as much as possible, and I loved it. And in my fantasy life, like, now I do photography as a profession. So I've modernized, and I have to play by certain other kind of rules. But in my fantasy life, I get back to the point where I can have a dark room and, which is a very slow process. You have to have time for that kind of thing. But I'd like to be able to get back to that in my own space one day is a goal.
Yes. I was thinking that you must be leaning that way too, because it is so addictive once you get into the dark room. And I think any one of us who've done photography, yearn those days were just magical, right? There's the magic of photography.
It's magic. And it's satisfying because it's physical. Like you physically make something. And then there's the magic of watching it appear. And if you don't preserve it and actually do the steps and you make it and then it disappears, it's just wonderful. I love it. I think it's just one of the most magical processes in the world.
Does Eloise have that fascination for it yet because of your interest?
She loves to take photographs, and because she's been around it every single day of her life, and there's cameras around, and as soon as she could understand pushing the button, I've had her taking photographs. Obviously, I don't push it on her. She has other interests, but she also loves to draw. Like my husband, his degree is in graphic design, and he was an artist, and he does all of the design aspects to our websites and our products. And so he taught her how to draw, and she's quite good at that. And so we guide her, but we also let her be a free child and do other crazy stuff.
Well, you clearly followed your passion from a very early age. I'm wondering which schools you were in, because if anyone's listening from Texas, and they're probably curious about which schools you attended.
Right. So after high school, I went to college in New York City. I attended the Fashion Institute.
Before that, though, which was your first two schools?
Like for high school?
Yes, high school and before high school, middle school.
Middle school. I don't even remember the name of my middle school. It's near to my high school. I went to James Martin High School, which is this massive Texas public high school in Arlington, Texas, in between Dallas and Fort Worth. I can't remember the name of my junior high.
Because we love to give a shout out to the teachers in our life. Those that have really influenced us.
Let me tell you, my high school photography teacher, Daniel Regalado, who was extraordinary. He was maybe, I think, in his 30s. He was young. He was married to the journalist teacher who did the school newspaper, and their rooms were next door to each other. And he loved photography, and he spent his own money to have this whole library of photographic books. And, my parents, an accountant and someone who works in law enforcement, I'm this very strange bird who loves photography, right? And they don't know anything about photography career. Like photography to them was shooting weddings, and I had no interest in shooting weddings. And so I loved going to high school photography class because all these books on the history of photography introduced me to some of the, Norman Parkinson and Irving Penn and Ansel Adams. And it was this world I wanted to live in. And it opened up all the possibilities of what photography could be that no one else could teach me. So that's where I really fell in love with fashion photography. I always loved fashion. Like I said, my grandmother and I would go to thrift stores and buy ball gowns, and I'd play dress up. Like I've always loved fashion as storytelling. And so he had these wonderful old fashion books and of fashion photography books, and I loved looking through them. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to learn how to be a fashion photographer. So that's how I ended up at the Fashion Institute of Technology, where I studied fashion photography to become a commercial photographer, which I did after I graduated in New York. I lived in New York for 13 years and had a commercial studio in Lower Manhattan, and I shot for all kinds of fashion brands, Donna Karan, and oh my God, there's like a whole list. I'm blanking, but I did it ad nauseum for years, and I shot for people like Vogue and Harper's Bazaar and things like that. And so I lived that dream.
Yes, clearly, and I'm sure people listening who would love to have that kind of straight line in their career, that you took the path that you manifested. You imagined this is your dream. This is what you were going to do. You make it sound easy, Jamie, but clearly there's a lot of hard work that goes into this at the beginning of anyone's career, and determination. So were you always a very single-minded child and determined and passionate, maybe a little bit stubborn about the course you wanted to take?
I mean, completely. It's your life, and you have to be in control of that, and you have to make the decisions that guide that. And I was very clearly focused, like, I am a photographer and I want to be a professional photographer. And this is what I want to dedicate my life to. This is what I love. This is what I want to go to work and do every single day. And you just have to do whatever sacrifice it takes to do that. And there's definitely self-doubt, and there's definitely struggle, and there's definitely frustrations. It's not easy, and it's scary. I think for the first 10 years of my career, I was terrified every single day I walked onto a set to do a shoot. I gave 110% and maybe more because I was just terrified. And but you have to just take every single step, and you just have to do it and show up, and what's the worst that can happen? But you have to fight your way through it, and you have to believe in yourself. Like, you can't expect other people to believe in you. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to fight for yourself and your vision. And that's something that has never changed for me, is that determination and that fight and that self-belief. Like, I know I can do this, even if this is terrifying, and even if I maybe not be totally qualified for it, I don't care. I'm going to push really hard to do it.
Did you have to face misogyny too in the beginning of your career? Because it's a very cutthroat world, fashion photography.
Yeah, I mean, when I grew up in fashion photography, other than Annie Leibovitz, it was all men for sure. And in college, you as a professional photographer, you start out assisting other professionals to learn the ropes, to learn, and to meet people and things. And so I was assisting professional photographers, and they're like, it's just so weird because I'm a kind of a girly girl. It's like they feel like they should be holding the door for me when it's my job to hold the door for them. So it was like weird things like that. And also I'd be like watching men sometimes on sets work, and then I'd be like, I could do that better. But I'm like this cute little girl, so no one's going to believe that. So I kind of just eventually said, forget this as far as assisting other photographers. Like, I saw how they did it. I knew I could do what they do, and I just needed to go out and do it myself and just ignore all of the noise and whatever anyone said, and just take it step by step. And that's kind of was I don't put a lot of energy or thought into negative things. I'm very productive and proactive. So I don't dwell on stuff that doesn't feel good. I just figure out, like, problem solve, ways forward, paths forward, goals, positive things.
A born optimist too, an extrovert.
Yeah, totally. Yes. Well, I'm actually very introverted, but like I'm a very positive
introvert. But extrovert, introvert, the two can be combined.
Yes.
So who would have been your idols? I mean, you mentioned obviously Ansel Adams, Parkinson, some of these names that you were looking at in between the pages, so to speak.
Yes.
But who would have been your real life sort of idols and mentors when you were starting out? I still, to this day, from the first time I saw his work, I've loved Irving Penn. I mean, to me, he is the god of photography, the father of photography. I just love his work so much. And I saw his book for the first time when I was in high school, and I'll never forget it. It's called Passages. When I was in college, I was at the photography store in downtown Manhattan, and the woman who was checking out in front of me, she said, put it on my account. And they said, what's the name of the account? And she said, Irving Penn. And I gasped, and I said, you work for Irving Penn? And she said, yes, I'm his studio manager. And I said, oh, he's my idol. I love his work. And I said, does he take interns? And she said, no, but you could come and meet him if you like. And so we arranged a time. And she said I could bring my portfolio, and he would look through it and give me some advice. And so I remember I wore like a tweed pencil skirt and a turtleneck top. I was like very put together, and because I was still very much from Texas, and like you get dressed up to meet someone respectably,
And I went to his studio, which was over by Union Square, and the elevator doors opened directly into his studio space. And he was there, and he looked through my portfolio, and we talked for a bit, and I was sort of just panicking, freaking out in my head the whole time because of like, he showed me around his studio, and it's like, oh God, like here's where he shot, this Nicole Kidman photo he told me about the north light from this window he'd use and how he have all of his assistants leave. So it's just him and the subject matter. And so it was this wonderful moment. And when we said goodbye and I got in the elevator and the doors closed, I just started bawling. But I remember he told me, he's like, you look very put together to be a photographer. And I was like, well, I'm like meeting my idol. Like, what am I supposed to show up in sweats? So it was a really extraordinary moment. And he's since passed, but that was like a pinnacle moment for me.
An early milestone in your career.
Totally. And he had this exhibition in Washington, D.C., and I had no money. I was so poor. I had no money. And so I went down to Chinatown. I'm in college. I went down to Chinatown and I took the Chinatown bus to Washington, D.C., which was like a 4-hour bus ride. And I don't remember how much it was, but I probably like skipped 3 meals to pay for it or something. And I went to his exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery, and it was the photographs of the woman who would become his wife, and they're platinum palladium printed. And it was the first time I got to see a real photograph printed that way, because I'd only seen the reproductions in books. And so I stood there at this museum in Washington, D.C., looking at these pictures that I had idolized throughout my high school, and I was just crying in the middle of this museum because they were so beautiful. And just to see when you see a real photograph printed, an art photograph printed by the artist, it is the detail and the feeling of it is so different than the reproduction of it. And then I went back. I couldn't even afford to stay overnight. So then I went and got back on the Chinatown bus back to Manhattan on the same day. And then he had this wonderful exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art some years later, where they had his actual like backdrops and flower work. And it was more like a retrospective of everything that he had done. And that was incredible too. So if anytime anyone has opportunity to see an Irving Penn exhibition where it's actually his printed work, it is truly photography as an art form to see them on the walls that way.
Who do you revere now?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm like, now I've kind of transitioned away from photographers, and because we're so inundated by images, that what really inspires me now is painting, looking at paintings. And I mean, obviously being in Europe is just the history of painting everywhere. And so that's where I really find a lot of my inspiration. Obviously, I'm very inspired by Dutch floral works, especially from the 16th century, 17th century. I find very inspiring. There's a lot of women painters back from that era. I love French. I love everything French. I love old French portrait paintings where the clothing is just absolutely extraordinary, and the technique and the textiles and the lighting and all of the details of everything that it's put into a painting, what that represents and what that means. And that's something that it's really influenced the work that I do in Provence, about things having meaning that you put in. Like if you have a peach with one leaf, it means truth and honesty from Dutch paintings. And so I try to like take these things that I learn and apply them when it makes sense in my life and when it makes sense in whatever I'm building for the storytelling.
Are you painting at all?
No, I have fantasies about, oh God, like one day I would just love to become a painter. But the truth is that I love photography so much. I just want to spend every second doing photography, that even if I have wild fantasies of painting, which makes a lot of sense for how I work now, because when I make a photograph, I call them photographic paintings, because I place everything the way someone would approach creating a painting compositionally. How you lay them out is how I work. Instead of a paintbrush, it's a camera. So I like the idea of being able to have more access to creating, like flowers in winter are very difficult for me because it's just not as abundant and as exciting as flowers in spring and summer. But I like the idea of like the Dutch painters could take flowers from every season and put them into one composition. And I can't do that in my work in Provence. So I like the creative freedom that painting could give me, but I'm just so in love with photography and the process of photography that I doubt I'll ever get around to doing it.
You don't see yourself combining another medium, do you? Because I know you were born in March, so you're Pisces, so I'm wondering if, there's the merger of the two fish swimming from different directions. Is that it? Does that probably mean that you could incorporate other mediums in the future?
I think so. I think right now, living in France was never a plan. And so we're still literally trying to get settled into a life in France. Like we just started as an official French business, and there's all of these like transition things that take time that have to happen. And I never meant to kind of put my professional career into a scope. I was a commercial photographer in New York, so I shot products for fashion brands. And then when I moved to Provence, I kept some of my clients as a way to afford to live in France. So I would just fly back to the States to work. And then because of COVID, I couldn't travel. And I didn't want to leave France because I was afraid I'd never get back in because the borders were closed. So I was like, okay, I lost all of my commercial work for that year. Like, how am I going to make money? And I don't like to dwell on things that don't feel good. So I'm a very proactive person. So I came downstairs and I told my husband, I said, well, I can't control any of this stuff, but what I can control is what I do with my days. And so while we're in lockdown, I'm going to make a piece of art every single day. And I'm going to share it. I'm going to share the process on my social media and then share the work. And I'm going to commit to this project. I'm going to call it Isolation Creation. And for the next 60 days while we're in lockdown, that's what I'm going to do with my life. And he said, okay, but can you start tomorrow? And I said, no, I'm doing this right now. And it's the only way that it was a positive thing that I could do. And what ended up happening is that, I invited people from around the world to also do it because we were all stuck in this lockdown. And I said, use the hashtag Isolation Creation so we can all follow each other's work and let's all make something together. And it was so I would recap what other people made around the world and I would share mine. And I never knew, it was a challenge for me as an artist because I never knew I can't leave my house. So what in the world am I going to photograph? And am I going to run out of things to photograph? Or, there's just all these things I couldn't control. And it was a really great challenge. And I realized I had a lot more creative muscle than I thought I had. And actually it thrived in the constraints of not being able to have anything I wanted whenever I wanted, or not be able to go out to the market and discover stuff. Just using what was around me was such a great practice. And I grew a lot during that time period. So eventually during that process, people were asking if they could buy prints of my work. And so we built an online shop and I started selling my photographs. I never thought I could be an art photographer. That's just such a level I thought I would never be at. I always thought I'd be a commercial photographer because that's just a trained technical thing you can learn how to do. And so I was like, wow, people want to own my photographs as artworks in their house. And there's just such an interesting thing. So we tried it and it was a wonderful experience and I loved doing it. And I was like, wow, if I get to go into the studio every day and make the kind of pictures that I want, that are stories about our life, about the seasons, about the food we eat, if I can do that for a living, that's like a dream come true. And so we kind of transitioned my business away from commercial photography, which is not always fun. It's you work with a lot of different personalities and pressures and deadlines, which are quite difficult, into this lovely little world where I get to kind of have creative freedom and make a living doing that. So now we have stationery and calendars, and we're making things with my photographs as products.
Well, this has become quite the marketplace now, isn't it? With so many different items that you're producing. It's a multifaceted business. Where do you see this going?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, ultimately, I just want to be able to continue to make art photographs of fruits and flowers and still lifes and things, and go through the, you don't, as a creative person, I don't just do the same thing forever and ever. Like it's a transition, and I'm doing this now, which will lead to something else, which will lead to something else. And I enjoy this journey that I'm on creatively. And I just want to be able to continue that. And I'm hoping that as we get better with manufacturing products that are related to my work, as far as home decor and office items. And like we make, in France, there's this great connection to craftsmanship and history. And so we've been finding artisans to work with. So for example, we made a leather camera strap that's inspired by my favorite camera strap, because I cannot stand logos on things. Like if you buy a Canon or a Nikon camera, you get this big, gaudy, horrible camera strap that comes with it that has the brand all the way across your chest, and it makes me insane. So I've always switched out camera straps for this really simple, chic leather camera strap that's vintage. And so we took that to these leather workers, a fourth generation family owned business in the south of France, and we had them work with us to create like my ideal camera strap. And so I had this access to these craftsmen, and so I kind of enjoy this idea of becoming sort of a creative, photographically based brand, like lifestyle brand that's a little French heritage mixed with classical art and products that you can bring into your home. And so we're new to all this. And if you'd have told me 10 years ago that I would be like making my own products and finding manufacturers and stuff, I'd be like, what are you talking about? It's crazy. So we're getting better and better at finding how to work with people and how that communication goes, and sampling and production timelines. And that's kind of a fun thing about life is ending up in places you never thought you'd be, and learning. And so every day we're learning how to do this better and better. So I'd like to really kind of continue to grow this and have it available in more stores around France and around the United States, and really be known for these lovely products that are highlighting the beauty of life.
Well, the beauty of life for you, of course, one of the main stars of this is flowers. Really, really love your flowers and do some beautiful, beautiful work.
I adore the flowers. Yes.
Talk a little bit more about that, Jamie. I mean, I'm trying to understand where this is in your soul, why this is such an important outlet for you to be so creative in that. There's so many ways you can show flowers, right? And light is everything. There's three important things in photography, right? Light, light, and light. Right. So talk a little bit about the magic of that for you, that comes from your soul.
The flowers, growing up, like I mentioned with my grandmother, we were always in her garden. She was always growing flowers. I would take roses to my teachers all through elementary school. I would take roses cut from my grandmother's garden as bouquets for my teachers. Like flowers, it's like they grew into my soul when I was little. And they bring me, just looking at them, not even with a camera, just looking at flowers makes me so happy. And my parents would take me to the Dallas Arboretum to see the tulips every spring. And I love beauty. And there's nothing more beautiful to me than the flowers. And they bring me joy. And so I like to look at them. And that's why and how they became my subject matter. And in the south of France is like, I call it the Garden of Eden, because it's just insane. The flowers, I mean, you can't escape them, and they're intoxicating, and they're wild, and they're cultivated, and they're Louis XIVs, and they're modern, and they're princesses. And it's a flower haven that I'm totally in love with. Even if I didn't take pictures, I would be doing something with flowers, because it's the joy. So that's where the flower photography came from, was just that joy of, okay, well, I'm not taking pictures of high heels for clients right now. So this is the thing I like to look at. And this is the thing I'm growing in my garden. And let me put my camera on that. And how do I bring that to life? How do I take you, the viewer, and show you what I love about this and have you feel what's magical? That, if you sit That's one of the things I love. I'll never forget this moment in France. I was walking in the country and there was this big wildflower patch. And if you just look at it, it's beautiful because there's color, right? It's like a Monet painting of color. But if you just stop and you stand there and you watch, it comes to life. There's a whole universe that's living in this flower field, and the bugs, butterflies, and just all this wonderful stuff to discover. And so I would start bringing that back into my work and like, look at this bug I found, or look at this butterfly I found, and all these colors and how these colors go together in May, but then those colors disappear. And now these are the colors we have in June. And look at what I found in the fields in June with these flowers. And so all of that joy and discovery is what I became the basis of my work.
You wish that your work was not your work, that you didn't have to be commercial. Would that make any difference to your creativity?
I enjoy the challenge, actually. I enjoy that there's a purpose to it, like a way. It's not like I think people fantasize about, oh, when I retire and I have free time, I'll make stuff for me. And what I like about it is that I can make it for me or for a product, but I enjoy the fact that I can make it and share it with you. And you can have it if you love it. You can have it on a stationery card, or you can have it hanging in your kitchen. And I like the idea that this thing that I'm really good at, I can share it with other people. And maybe they don't have the time, or they don't have the camera, or they don't have the skill, or they don't have the access to whatever I have. And so they can, but if they did have those things, they would do that too. I like that I can give them that if that's something that they love and that I can do. So I enjoy that it is my job, and I enjoy the challenges of surviving and challenges of how to make it accessible and what I can do with it in these different ways. I think that's really fun as far as mental puzzles, figuring that out.
Where do you get the most satisfaction in this process then?
Well, the moment I take the picture, I think there is a chemical, it's like drugs to me. I think there's a chemical reaction that gives me all of the dopamine and whatever the good drugs are that happens in my body, because I'm so happy and satisfied when I make something that I love and it feels right. And when I build my work in the studio and I'm creating, I have to be by myself because I'm having all this dialogue in my head, and I'm really in my head. Like there's sometimes my husband comes by the studio and he like pops his head in and he says something to me, and I don't remember that he came. I didn't respond to him, and he knows that I'm just in my head. I'm not being rude or anything. He just knows me that well. I'm so concentrated. And when I build it, there's a certain moment. It's like that voice that on the airplane that said, "Oh, great. Now you never know what it's like to live in France." At a certain moment, something says stop. And I literally release my hands from whatever I'm fiddling with, if it's a piece of linen or the way a petal's falling or something like that. And I let it go and I stop. And then I go and I make the photograph. And I've gotten in my studio, I have south-facing French windows. There's like doorway windows over the garden. And I track the light all year long. And so now I'm on 8 years, so I know the light very well in the studio. And it's a dance of finishing the composition of building it without the camera, just building it, and the light ending at the right time, for the light to be at the right time, for the photograph to come together. And there are days that maybe I'm not planning to take a photograph, but I look out the window and there are certain clouds that make the most beautiful light because there's moisture in them. And so things will glow. They have to be like a veil. I call them veil clouds. And I know like whatever I'm doing that day has to get rearranged because I have to go take a photograph in the studio because that light it glows in a way that is heavenly. So it's this dance that I do, and I really feel like a synergy between the subject matter, the camera, and the light. And when it all comes together that way, it's the most, no matter what I'm doing with that photograph afterwards, just capturing that is the happiest feeling and place on earth for me.
What's your favorite light?
It's that veiled light. It happens on could be rainy day, but not like a blanket, not like a gray London rain, gray Paris rain. It's like one of those days where the clouds move quickly and they're a little fluffy and there's moisture. And so it's right before the sun starts to set. So it's really golden and it can push through that light. That evening sunset, almost raining light is the most perfect light in the world to me.
I'm sure you've moved on from the Pentax Spotmatic, but for the photographers listening, Jamie, what do you use now?
So now, look, I have to be perfectly honest. I'm not somebody who puts a lot of time, thought, energy, and investment in cameras. I'm like not, I could care less about technical stuff. It's not that interesting to me. I don't even know how many megapixels my camera is. This is something that my husband is very good at. So if it were up to me, I would have been a film photographer my entire life. I've probably been very poor and had no clients, but I would be happy, right? And he forced me kicking and screaming into the digital age. And he got me on Instagram and Twitter and Tumblr and all these things that ultimately changed my life and helped me grow as a photographer and get clients and be discovered and all that stuff. So what happened was we traveled and we lived in New York and we had commercial clients. I would take my big professional cameras. Back then I was shooting with a Canon 5D Mark II, Mark III, something like that. And we would rent medium format cameras. And we were also shooting with a film, like a motion picture film camera called the Red. And because you can pull stills from it. And we were doing hybrid photograph video work for clients that we called cinemagraphs, which is basically the concept of it is a living photograph. So there's no beginning or end. It's just alive. So we were doing this for clients. They're flying all around the world. We traveled 6 months out of the year. And I said, these cameras are very big and very heavy. And I said, I want a little camera I can strap across my body on our travels. And so he got me the Sony A7R II or something like that. And it's a really small mirrorless camera body. And I put just a 35 millimeter single lens on it. So it's really compact. It's great. You can strap it across your body and it's like weightless. It's like you have no camera on you. So that I could snap pictures at all these extraordinary places that we were going. For Instagram or just for our memories. When I went to France, we packed up all my studio stuff and put it in storage. And I just took that Sony. That was it. Because I had no plans for what I was going to do in France. I was just going to eat cheese and drink wine and live in France for a year before I died. So that's all I had. And I didn't know anybody. My husband at the time, he stayed in New York and States because we had some client work and he was dealing with that. And so I was just there by myself and I had that camera. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I wanted to take pictures. So I said, well, this camera has a good timer and stuff, and maybe I'll do some self-portraits. And so I was just playing with photography again. And at that point in my career, as a professional, I'd gotten to a point where I was very uninspired and I knew how to do the work without really having to think. I felt like I was just walking in and pushing the button, I'm just along an assembly line of production. And I spent that first year in Provence falling in love with photography again. And so I was I was taking pictures in the garden and I was taking pictures out in the market. I had no car, so it was only places that I could walk to. And I started doing some self-portraits and it was super fun. And I was posting them to Instagram and it was just sort of this ongoing diary of a creative evolution that I was sort of live blogging on social media with no intention of any of this being or meaning anything to anybody. And I spent a lot of time writing and getting better as a writer. And again, with no intention. So I have journals and journals filled with writing. And ultimately, these things would lead to becoming my book, An American in Provence, which I had no plans for. And I think it was not until the 5th year I was there that someone approached me about doing a book. And I was like, well, I basically have it written and I have it photographed. So let me think. So what was your original question though? I went on this long tangent.
What camera you're using today?
Oh, the camera. That's right. The camera. So that's how I ended up with that camera. And that's why I ended up taking self-portraits because it had this functionality that had this Wi-Fi. So I was using the timer to take self-portraits that first year in Provence. And then eventually my husband's like, it has Wi-Fi capability. You can connect it to your phone. So then I could see the composition, which is everything, right, for a photography to see through the frame. And in the beginning, I would take the timer, then I have to run back to the camera and see and make adjustments, which is not great for if you want your hair or your clothes or whatever to be in a very certain specific position. So once he taught me that I could connect my camera to my phone and to my iPad, I could then construct a whole scene with myself in it, or set it up to build a still life and have the iPad off frame so I could see what the camera's seeing without having to go back and forth, which is really exhausting. So then I could build all of these images this way, and that kind of opened up a whole other level of creativity. So I'm still using this. I have the newest version now, the Sony A7R. I don't know if it's the 4 or the 5, whatever the newest Sony A7 version is, that's what I have. For client work, I'll use the 24-105 lens. I work with hotel groups still and things like that. And then I still have the 50 millimeter and the 35 millimeter like single lens for smaller, when I want to make the camera more compact and smaller, that I take on trips or if I'm just walking around. So that's what I use. I have old SX70 Polaroid cameras that I absolutely love. I did a whole Polaroid flower series that I sold out in the first hour that we released them, and we had them framed in Provence locally. And they're little artifacts from the studio. So I enjoy doing that. I have a series with one of my friends who's a French actress and model that I shoot her only on this Polaroid film because I like how soft and dreamy it is on skin. It just kind of makes everything like little, like angelic. There's an angelic quality to it that I like. It kind of smooths over the real world and lets you dream a little bit when you look into SX70 Polaroid. I have a 4x5 film camera. I learned 4x5 in film in college, and I enjoy how long it is, like for the lovers of the process of photography. And so it's very slow and very tedious, and you have to be very precise. And I enjoy that process because you really feel like you're making something. And it's very satisfying in that way. And then, of course, because it's film, you don't really know what's on the film until you get it back. And it's just a thrill. I have some medium format cameras that I used to shoot in the 90s. There was a fashion photographer that I adored. Oh my God, what's his name? He's so famous. I don't study fashion photography anymore, so I forget people's names. Well, there's one of the biggest names in fashion photography. He shot with this very specific medium format Pentax camera that I also have in Provence, but I sadly never use. But it has this like incredible shutter release sound. It's like clunk, 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 clunk. So when you take a picture, it's just like, yeah, I got it. It's like so like, oh, it's good. Feels good.
Yes, there's a real confirmation there that the shutter fired.
Yeah. So that's nice.
So one of the things we like to hear about from our guests is the kind of films they like to watch and books they read and poetry. So which kind of leads me to what we mentioned earlier, the club that you started, the Starling Club, that you set up in the Provence there, because you're including these things as well. And I will say before we hear about this, that when you sent me your playlists, Jamie, I was hooked to your musical choices.
Yay!
Yeah, I have added them to my playlists, and I love that music. I've used it a lot for my own, when I'm in the studio painting myself. I love your choice of music. So keep them coming, Jamie. You really have a great time.
I'm thrilled to hear that. So the playlist that I shared with you, which I hope you're going to share with others, that's the music that I listen to when I'm in the studio, because I need stuff that kind of sweeps you away, and your brain, it's not distracting. So your brain can be in the zone of whatever is being created, but it helps kind of guide you along. So that's what that music's about. And then I have the other playlist I sent you is what I like to listen to when I'm going through Provence on a bike ride or a drive or a picnic. And it's just sort of the right feeling, the right mood.
Yeah, you totally took me back there. Yeah, absolutely. I was back in the Provence. Let's talk about this Starling Club.
Yes. Okay. So first, let me tell you this kind of the little seed of where this all began. You mentioned about, what the kind of things you like to watch and read. And we kind of have a joke between my husband and I that I like to watch anything French from the 18th century. As long as it's set, as long as someone's in a corset and it's in France and it's before electricity, I'll watch it and I'll love it. So that's sort of our joke. And I said some years ago, I was like, God, I wish it could just be my job to read, A Movable Feast and A Year in Provence and M.K. Fish, the Provence 1975, and like all these books about the south of France, like Julia Child's biography and stuff like that. But I'm like, I'm so busy in my work and in my world, I don't really have a lot of time for that. So I need to like make it my job to have time for that. And in the more recent years, there's been a shift in online social media starting like in 2022. And I found the culture, I don't like negativity, and I found the culture to start becoming just too negative. It's just that's the go-to, and snarky or mean or whatever. And I don't like it. It gives me anxiety. So I don't like to be in that space. And I was just telling my husband, like, God, I wish there's like a place I could hang out with people who like the stuff that I like, who want to watch 18th century movies and read A Year in Provence and like cook French food and like talk about it. And we don't have to be afraid of someone coming in and being nasty and saying something nasty or making fun of us or whatever. That's not nice. Like a place there where we can all like learn and share and grow together. And I share what I know about photography and they share what they know about whatever it is that they do. And so a couple of years ago, we were talking about, well, can we build a space like that? Like, how do we build a space like that? And we're kind of watching the online scape and everyone's starting Substacks. And we talked about doing that. And my big problem is that it's not visual enough for me. Like when I do something, I want you to feel it and you see it and you feel it and you should visually be able to read. Like I speak the language visually, right? So we were kind of writing down all the things that I wish I could create and read and share and cook with other people. And then it was just the like, but where, how and where. And I happened upon this girl I follow. Her name is Molly Baz, who's, she worked at Bon Appetit and kind of became a YouTube star. And now she does all her own cookbooks and things. She's a New York Times bestseller. And she launched this private online club. And I was like, okay, look at that. Like, this looks really visual as a place for her to share her recipes. And so I signed up for her club and I went in there and I was like, oh my God, Kevin, this is it. Like, she built her own little world and it looks like her and it's her style and it's visual and yet all this information is there. And I said, I want that. I want to be able to tell stories about France or how I make stuff or whatever recipe I cooked in this visual escape. And that's private. So I don't have to worry about the weird culture of the internet anymore. And so we just cold called the people who made her site and we're like, hey, we love Molly's site. Like, could you build something? And we described what we wanted to build. Could you build something like that, but in this version for us? And they said, yeah, we can do that. And the budget worked out for what we could afford. And one of the biggest differences between like Molly's is just used for her to post recipes. And mine, we have essays, travel guides, recipes, and photography or tutorials in general. But what we also have is a private server chat room. So in this chat room, it's totally incredible. And then we just launched, we like quietly launched this in June, and we'll publicly launch. It'll still be private, but I'll publicly start talking about it in this fall. We just wanted to work out all the kinks. So in this chat room server, you have all these incredibly talented, lovely women from around the world, Australia, America, UK, Chile, Africa, who have come to this place frustrated with the culture of communication and social media, who want to connect with people like exactly like what became missing for me online. Because I used to be able to learn and share, and it was this great thing. And then until it wasn't great, until it was like every time I opened my messages, my day would be ruined because, oh, you didn't comment about this war thing happening halfway around the world. And you didn't say anything about the US election. I'm like, oh my God, like, why are you asking me all these questions? This is so personal. Like, stop. So I have this space where we have a code of conduct. Like, you're not allowed to say anything that could be hurtful or harmful to somebody else. Or like, there's no religious talk. There's no race talk. There's no sexual talk, sexual orientation talk, none of that. You're not allowed to make anyone feel uncomfortable. It's like, we're going back to my grandmother's age when she would tell me, and remember her telling me, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. It's like I'm becoming the grandmother of the universe. It's like, we're going to go back to having manners. We're going to go back to making people feel good and supported and safe, that they can share if they're struggling, share if they're creating something wonderful, share and have it, let them know that they're going to be seen. That was another huge issue with social media. It's like, no one knows who's seeing your work anymore. And like, strangers are seeing your work now, and it used to not be that way. It's like, I want you to know, if you make a painting and you post it, we're going to see it. And people who like it can tell you that, and you'll know that. And then there's a code of conduct that if somebody doesn't like it, they're not going to ruin your day, because they're not allowed to be nasty. So it's like, you have to keep that opinion to yourself. You can have it, but you just have to keep it to yourself. So we built this safe space, and we had no idea if it was going to work. And people showed up, and it's like so wonderful that I can't stand to go outside of it. Like, I'm like, do I have to post on Instagram? Like, oh, it's so gross. Like, I like being in this space because it's happy and positive and nurturing. And in this group, we have a seasonal book club. So our first book is, of course, A Year in Provence, and it's all voted on by, like, people suggest. We have a master book list, a master movie watch list, and a master cookbook list. And so the community says, oh, I just found this, and I'll add it to the list. And then when the time comes up to decide what movie we're going to watch, we watch a movie together once a month. This Saturday, we're watching To Catch a Thief. The books and the movies and the cookbooks are all themed around France. They can be made by Americans or made by somebody else, but it has to have like a French tie to it, is the kind of connector of this whole club. So we're watching To Catch a Thief, and I'm making a cocktail for the movie, and I'm making a recipe from the movie, and we all come together at a specific time around the world. We have one girl from Australia who always gets up at 5:15 in the morning and watches stuff with us. And we just sit in the chat room and we watch stuff together. So we watched Eiffel, we watched The Taste of Things. And it's great because people know different things. So they share throughout the movie about the location, about the costume, about how this was done, or they make you laugh, or when something's sad, like we're all like there together supporting each other through it. And it's just really fun. It's turned into my favorite day of the month doing that. So we have our watch parties, we have our book club. We're launching this fall a cookbook club. So we're going to all cook a recipe from a French themed book once a season. And so it's this very positive, creative space where we're all kind of learning and growing together. And that is the Starling Club. And it's called the Starling Club because where I live in Provence, my favorite time of day to photograph is at dusk. And that's when the starlings fly over my village in their murmur, in their group. And it's magical. And so I've always loved starlings in that time of day because it's associated with my work and that happy drug that happens in my body, because that's when I make my photograph. So my daughter's name is Eloise Starlingberg. And we named the Starling Club because ideally we're all together. We're all birds of a feather flocking together. So that's where the name came from.
I guess your parents, and you have a stepfather as well, I believe, they maybe wouldn't be at all surprised with your journey then.
Oh, no. They're very surprised. I'm totally the weird one in my family.
But you always did the photography. That was always your interest.
I always did the photography. Yeah. But I don't have the traditional path. It's very I'm sure it's very nerve-wracking and bizarre to them. And I think at this point now they're not surprised when I'm doing something new, because just it feels like I'm always, oh, now she's in France. Oh, now she's, in Bali shooting this for that thing. Now she's building an online club. Okay. Now they're to the point where they're just all right, well, you're fine then. But, it's not like they don't sit around the dinner table and have in-depth conversations about art and flowers with me, because it's just so different from their world, which is totally fine because they're wonderful people. But I'm the black sheep, I think.
So any of them share your interest in photography and then in the things that you love? Obviously, your grandmother did with what she shared with you, but I'm thinking of your parents now and your brother, James.
Yeah. So my brother, he is really knowledgeable about fountain pens and fountain inks. And we have a chat room in our club that's all about that. So when I was over there a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned it to him, and he's like, oh, and he took me to his office and he opened up, he had drawers and drawers of pens and inks from around the world. And so I did a whole deep dive with him and shared what I learned from him in the club, because there's papers and tips and all this kind of crazy rabbit hole stuff you can go down. So we bonded about that. No one else does photography or anything like that, but my grandmothers. So I have my stepfather, my mother and my stepfather were married when I was so young that I don't remember. It's like I have two dads because I grew up with him. So I don't remember a time when she was with my technical father, and they're all like family together. It's really nice how it all worked out. So I have like two dads, and my father's mother's who raised me in Texas, and she was very into crafts and projects and cooking and gardening. And so I had that imprint from her. And then my stepfather, his mother was a painter, and she was an art school teacher, and she made the most wonderful paintings, just totally abstract, colorful, wonderful things. And she lived in Beaufort, North Carolina, where I was last week visiting that family. And she was very sophisticated, and she was very elegant of a woman. Both of my grandmothers were very elegant and dressed very beautifully and jewelry and nice stuff. And she loved art in a very sophisticated way and loved to discuss art in a sophisticated way. So they're both since passed on. But I had that every summer with her, especially as I became more and more immersed into photography, and she was a teacher, so she would be able to guide me through some interesting conversations about the concept behind a photograph and the purpose behind a photograph and what it would mean for somebody else to view it, not just what I wanted to take pictures of, and what would be more long lasting and have more effects and stuff like that. So she was an interesting person for me to talk art with. My stepfather, he's a trained horticulturalist is his degrees in. So when he married my mother, he worked at the botanical gardens in Fort Worth. And so we always had incredibly beautiful gardens at my parents' house because that's what he did. And then later on, he went and ran the grounds for DFW Airport. So it was less like flowers and tulips and more, keeping it nice and tight and tidy and running grounds crews. But he has a really nice love for gardens and things. And he's been to some of the gardens in Europe that I cherish. And so we have that in common to bond over. But I'm the only photographer.
Well, what next for the photographer?
Well, we're gonna go on this journey with the club, which is quite exciting, and we're gonna hope that we build a space that ultimately can change people's lives to help them grow creatively or have support or whatever their dreams are, that they can connect with other people, because like we had a meetup in Texas, and it's, these women showed up and they all got to meet each other, and they're all people who like and are into the same things. And, all these real human connections is what I'm hoping ends up changing people's lives and guiding them into careers or dreams that can become reality. So that I'm going to nurture. That's going to become my main focus for the next few years is seeing what I can do with this community and making a really positive, safe space for especially women online. And then in my work, I'm just totally mad about flowers. I can't get enough. And I think about them all day, and I can't wait to be back in the studio. It drives me insane when I'm not home. And there's so many photographs I want to create, and there's some food still lives that I want to play with. And, I just want to go out in nature and continue to discover like I'm a child and just capture that in my studio and wherever that leads, if it ends up on planners and on people's desks is a wonderful outcome. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how I can transition my love of photography into things that people can also enjoy.
Well, clearly you are doing that, and we will put links in the show notes, Jamie, to both your website, and also to the Starling Club.
Thank you.
So listeners can find out more about both of those, and of course follow your work on social media too.
Thank you. I just want to preference one thing about the Starling Club. It's behind a paywall, and that's because we pay to maintain the server, and we have people and moderators to keep it, a safe space. So it is behind a paywall, and it will always be behind a paywall. And that's just to be able to maintain it and run it in the ways that it needs to be done. So I don't want you to be surprised. It's not a free site.
Well, we'll look forward to learning more about that, Jamie, and really appreciate you taking time and sharing your journey with us here on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for letting me tell my story, and I hope it inspires some people to take some photographs.
And as always, you can find links to our guests' social media and websites by scrolling down to the show notes with each episode. You'll also find a link to our Instagram account where you can follow and comment on the episodes, and of course any suggestions that you may have for future guests. We always love to hear from you. You'll also find our email address there too if you prefer email. Thank you for listening. We always appreciate you taking the time. We know you have many choices now in podcast land, so thank you for joining us here on AART. And also thank you again to my guest this week, Jamie Beck. I'll be back next week when my guest will be the mixed media artist Carla Chufo, so I do hope you'll join me then.